Special duty. It was so long ago that it's difficult to remember it all, but pieces come back to me from time to time. If you take the pieces, you sometimes get most of the story and what happened so long ago. It must have been about 1974. I was in the Navy back then. My wife and oldest son, then about 4, were living in Oakland, Maryland temporarily. I'd re-enlisted in Pittsburgh and was given orders to Virginia Beach, Virginia. In fact, I was in the process of finding an apartment for my young family. So in the interim, my family was with my folks in Oakland. I guess I'd been down at my new duty station at Little Creek, Virginia Beach, for about a week. I'd gotten the first weekend off, so I headed to see my family in western Maryland. The trip was about 350 miles. I guess it's in March sometime. I made some good time. The traffic through the Hampton Roads Tunnel was light for a Friday, and Richmond posed no problems. In fact, I was above Romney, West Virginia by about 7:30. A cold rain hammered outside. The winding road was only evident for about 100 feet. I noticed a hitchhiker as I rounded a curve out of Kaiser. Usually don't pick up hitchhikers, but the man looked harmless. And also felt pity on the poor man, since the rain and cold certainly wasn't good for anyone. I pulled over. The dark, rain-coated man with an overnight bag slowly made his way to the passenger door of my car. "Where are you heading?" "Up to Alto," the chunky man of about 45 responded. "Hop in." With that, he tossed his overnight bag on the back seat and got in my car. No sooner than he had gotten in, I began noticing the wheezing and coughing. I looked over and noticed that clear snot was emanating from the man's nostrils. Additionally, it was running down in almost a slow torrent to his raincoat lapel. Portions of the snot, dried and reactivated by the rain, smeared his coat from the lapel to about his third buttonhole. The man spoke little. There he sat with his head tilted against the left side of his shoulder. The wheezing and coughing was sporadic but continuous. As I said before, he was about 45. However, his skin bore an unusual reticulation, giving him a maturity of age that seemed unnatural. His head was seemingly swollen. Slight tinges of red appeared below his eyes. However, his pallor was a most unnatural white. And he was a heavy man. In truth, he looked like a walking cadaver with rouge below his brown eyes. I tried not to notice his situation too much. I did not want the suffering man to feel even more at ease. As the car rounded the few hills left on the Piedmont prior to the Allegheny Plateau, a smell, rather a stench, permeated the car's interior. It was not the distinguishing odor of bad hygiene. No, there was no smell of fecal or urine. No, there was no smell of unwashed clothing or smelly shoes. It was the smell of death. The hacking, coughing, wheezing, and putrid emanations continued as we approached Backbone Mountain. There were several moments in the travel that I thought he would die on me right there. The few short and straight valley miles of Alto were just minutes away. The man beside me began an unlisted soliloquy. "I was down at Martinsburg." His obscure statement needed no translation. The man had been at the Veterans Hospital in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Cough, cough, wheeze. "They can't do nothing for me." I sat motionless, driving on, staring at the road. An uneasiness overtook me. I was very uncomfortable. I glanced over at the man once, and he continued. "I was in the Army during World War II. I was given special duty. We were, experimented on with different types of poison gas and biological agents. It was all done at a camp in Nevada. I'm afraid I'm done for." I nodded from behind the steering wheel. There was no other response that I could fathom that would be appropriate. Sometimes the best response is no response. Like you can dig yourself a hole. You can hurt somebody. You can add injury to their misery. You can plain out anguish them with your comments. Besides, I was young, you might say socially retarded. At that time, I could offer less comfort than a used Yugo. I wondered if the man had a wife and family somewhere in the hills. I wondered if he could ever hold down a job with his condition. Certainly his life had been rough. How he ever made it this far would be, forever, an impenetrable mystery. Almost immediately the man seemed to go to sleep, or at least rest his eyes. His breathing was always a struggle, like his last breath was his last breath. And the mucus emanations flowed continually like the moisture of a slowly dripping faucet. I thought long and hard of how many men were treated so, how many experiments had the government covertly done, how many lives were ruined. I knew that they were always selective when it came to candidates. They usually chose those from, like, the mountains around me or the ghetto. They seemed to leave those young guys at Harvard and Yale alone. I guess there's a pecking order even to participatory democracy. The 5 miles to Alto seemed like hours. I felt so uneasy. Years later I regretted my discomfort, knowing well that his suffering was 1,000 times worse than mine. But I don't feel that I'm alone with such feelings. Most of us are very uncomfortable with the unknown. He woke as we approached the turnoff to Alto. It was like he had a built-in alarm system. "I'll get out here." I pulled the car over to the side of the crossroads, and he got out. The incessant wheezing, coughing, and mucus running never stopped. He labored to pull his overnight bag from the back seat. He closed the passenger car door and walked slowly over the road. Then I pulled out. Even his walk revealed his misery. As best that I can remember, I don't believe that we exchanged words when he got out of the car. And what could I say to him? Good luck, have a nice day? None of the normal goodbyes would have made any sense. I continued my journey up Backbone Mountain, made the rest of the journey to Oakland without incident. The subject of the hitchhiker has never come up. It has been more like I didn't want to bring it up. But I've never forgotten the half hour with the man who had special duty.